In the heart of Queen Elizabeth National Park lives an animal of fearsome reputation. Renowned for its ability to hunt and kill some of the largest animals on Earth, including elephants, its name strikes fear into those who live at the park edge. Yet, it is also an animal that is severely threatened with dwindling numbers and on the verge of extinction in Uganda. The African lion, a symbol of power and royalty for centuries among different cultures around the world, is revered and held in higher esteem than all other animals. This king of the beasts, though, is no longer the ruler of his jungle. As human populations have grown across Africa, his kingdom has diminished in size and value. Lions are thought to number around 23,000 individuals in Africa. This might sound a lot, but actually is only half the number of seats in the Nambole National Stadium in Kampala. Until recently, we did not have an estimate of the number of lions in Uganda, but a recent survey by the Wildlife Conservation Society estimates fewer than 400 animals are left, most of them confined to our national parks, Queen Elizabeth, Makshan Falls, and Kidepo Valley. Comparisons with numbers estimated for Queen Elizabeth National Park in 1999 show that lions have declined by 30% in the last 10 years. If this loss is not reversed soon, Uganda will have no lions left. Lions live in savannas and woodlands for the most part, but can also survive in arid conditions in some parts of Africa. They basically live in these savannas because this is where the largest amount of meat on the hoof is available, and lion numbers are very closely linked to the amount of prey that is available at a site. Lions are unusual in the mammal world in having what is called a fission-fusion social system. Although they live in prides, the pride members don't all move around together in one group. Instead, a lioness and her cubs will move within a specific range and regularly meet up with other females and their cubs. The lionesses will often cooperate to make kills and feed together, but can then separate and live on their own for several days before meeting up again. The only other mammal in Uganda that behaves like this is the chimpanzee, and it is also similar to how humans live. Lion prides typically have about 4 to 9 lionesses with their cubs and 2 to 6 adult males. Lionesses stay in their pride for most of their lives, although occasionally an individual will transfer to another pride. Lionesses become adult at about 5 or 6 years old and bear 2 to 4 cubs in a litter. About half of all the cubs die in the first year of their life, and this is the most risky time to be a lion. If the cubs survive, a lioness will suckle them for about a year and then produce the next litter after 20 months. A lioness can live for about 20 to 25 years and therefore produces about 8 litters in her lifetime. Males are kicked out by the dominant male when they reach the age of 3 to 4 years old and live on their own until they're strong enough to take over a pride. Often males form coalitions with other males and work together in groups of up to 4 individuals to take over a pride. Once they hold a pride, the members of the coalition each have rights to mate with the females, thereby making sure they stick together and don't fight. When courting a female, they may mate every 30 minutes for 4 days at a go. No wonder they call them the king of the beasts. However, their rule never lasts long, and they're often removed by another coalition within 2 to 4 years. Lions can be recognized individually by the pattern of the whiskers around their nose. Each animal has a unique pattern which, together with cuts and scars on the body, allowed researchers to name each individual. The Wildlife Conservation Society has been studying the lions in the Ishasha sector of Queen Elizabeth National Park, Uganda, for the past 6 years, and their researchers know every individual in that part of the park. Edward Okot Omoya leads the research team with Mustafa Nsubuga as a field assistant, and they put radio collars on some individuals so they can follow them and figure out where they range. Radio tracking is not as simple as it might seem at first, because radio signals bounce back and forth off trees and rocks, and it can be quite difficult to find exactly where the lion is.
Counting lions is the most interesting bit of the work. What we do, we have corn speakers put up on the roof of a vehicle, and then a Fox Pro machine which has a buffalo distress call played for 30 minutes. So what we do, we use a GIS program to get points.
Going out at dusk, when the lions are most likely to be hunting and hungry, the research team basically makes themselves the bait and wait to see who turns up. Using a spotlight, they can then identify the approximate age and sex of the animal. They have calculated how far away lions respond to such a call, so that the numbers seen can then be converted to the total numbers for the park.
Lions are important to UWA because they are signature animals, the signature species that drive tourism. They are one of the big five. Lots of tourists all over the world come to Africa because of the majesty of the lion among the other five. The lion is the king of the jungle. Everybody wants to see the king, everybody wants to be associated with the king, understand the king. And so lions drive tourism to our parks.
Ishasha is the area that is most famous for its tree-climbing lions, and it is quite common to see lions resting on the branches of the large fig trees that are found in this part of the park. There are only a few other sites in Africa where you can regularly see lions in trees, which makes Ishasha a very special place. Tourists hear about these lions from all over the world and want to see them lounging about digesting their breakfast of buffalo or antelope steak. In spite the studies from Wildlife Conservation Society that have shown that the number of lions that climb trees fluctuates between 20 to 30 individuals only, this is an insignificant number to be so important for the tourism industry in Uganda.
From their carnivore nature, lions also weed out old and diseased animals, thereby controlling disease spread within animals, and also removing animals that may not have the kind of gene structure that you'd want in a population. So they also control, it's funny, they kill these animals, but they actually control the health and viability of those very species that they hunt.
Lions eat a variety of animals, depending on what they can catch. In Ishasha, there are 3 main species they focus on. The Uganda kob is the most common food item on the menu because it is abundant and the most common large mammal in the park. Topi are also chosen, but because they are rarer species, they are not preyed upon as often as the kob. Interestingly though, a study made in the 1970s showed that the topi were the most abundant prey item at the time in Ishasha, when this animal was much more abundant. Finally, buffalo are a good catch if you can get them, but they're also the most dangerous to tackle. Buffaloes can be particularly mean and aggressive and will readily attack the lions in retaliation for an attempted kill. They have also been known to charge and kill young cubs to make sure lion numbers don't get too high. However, an adult buffalo can keep a pride of lions going for several days and is a good prize to have, but usually requires several lionesses to kill an animal. Once killed, the lionesses will usually drag the carcass into the shade to hide it if they can. Vultures are often on the lookout for the prey of the lions and will come down to feed on the carcasses whenever the lions move away from it. Lions, though, will guard and defend their kills, and any unsuspecting vulture needs to be very careful around a carcass.
People who visit here, they are mostly interested in lions. Every visitor that comes here would like to do a game drive, and they do it in Kasenyi. That's the area where you usually see lions. And we have high numbers of tourists visiting Kasenyi area because of lions. The drop in numbers does concern me. First of all, the lions are part of the ecosystem. They control the prey numbers here, and this could shift the balance if the lions are out of the equation. From an ecological point of view, that concerns me. And then also from the tourism point of view, because it's an animal that people would love to see, if the numbers drop and they are rare to see, that could also affect tourism. It could also affect the revenues that we get.
Tourism brings in more foreign currency to Uganda than any other business at the moment, and the industry is growing steadily. Nearly 200,000 tourists visit Uganda's parks each year, of which 70% visit the parks where the lions are found. After mountain gorillas in Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, tourists most want to see lions and are very disappointed if they don't find them. If lions become so rare they could not be seen, it is likely that tourists would go to Kenya or Tanzania rather than visit Uganda, and it is therefore very important that the remaining lions in the parks are protected and that their numbers can rebuild. You may wonder why the lion numbers are declining so drastically. One of the causes is the fact that the pastoralists are grazing cattle and other livestock in the parks. While the animals may not be killed in the park, they leave a trail of scent that lures the lions out to the cattle kraals at night and brings lions closer to the villagers as a result. If a cow is killed, an owner may poison the carcass to try and poison the lands if they return to feed on it. This cruel death kills the animal over several hours or days even. The poison used is a pesticide that is also harmful to people and which has been banned in the United States of America. A person who poisons a carcass also creates a risk of poisoning people and may not succeed in killing the lands in any case. Often, other animals come to feed on the carcass and die in the process. Many hyenas and vultures have been killed in the recent past in this way.
The main threat is the conflict between the lions and the cattle keepers. The cattle keepers try to bring their cows to graze in the national park, and the method they use is to drive in the cows and leave them unattended to. And so when lions come across the cows, it is an easy prey for them, so they kill the cows. And what these people, the pastoralists, do is to use the carcass as bait and poison the lions. So most of the mortality that we have registered here is as a result of poisoning. That's the main threat. Also, poachers do set snares to trap other animals, and so lions sometimes get in these traps and get maimed, which I think is also another threat. Then another threat, also diseases that do affect the lions. A few of them die from diseases, and also road kills. We have speeding vehicles through the park, and we have registered mortality as a result of road accidents.
Usually snares are set to catch antelopes, but lions can be easily trapped by them. Snares are laid in gaps between the bushes and are usually a wire noose that goes around the neck of the animal as it walks along. When the animal realizes there's something around its neck, it tries to run, pulling the noose tighter and tighter until it suffocates. Uganda Wildlife Authority rangers spend much of their time searching for and removing these snares in Uganda's parks. Sometimes hunters target lions because they believe that body parts have medicinal or magical purposes, but this has been shown to be just superstition. In order to tackle the poisoning of the lions, Edward and Mustafa have started a program of working with the pastoralists at the edge of the park. There is a need to build better relations between the pastoralists and Uganda Wildlife Authority and address some of their needs.
Seniona yali edinsi abasongora na paketa kabeiro kandi abataka oba baisenkuru yitwe still bambaguma.
That even before the park was gazetted, that is before 1930, they were here living with these animals. Their grandfather were here, and the wild animals were grazing together with cattle. They had no problem until...
Historically, the pastoralists lived in what is now the park with the wildlife. They left during the time of rinderpest and sleeping sickness in the late 1800s, and as a result, wildlife numbers increased. The pastoralists now live on land at the edge of the park that is not very suitable for grazing cattle. Much of it is covered by an invasive plant species, Lantana camara, which reduces the availability of grass. The plant spreads rapidly and takes over the land. As a result, the pasture available for the cattle has been declining, forcing them to take their cattle into the park. There are also issues over access to water on their land, where streams have been diverted upstream for irrigation and no longer flow to their cattle watering troughs. As a result, they have to water their cattle in the park. The pastoralists feel marginalized and excluded from any decision making and feel they have no choice but to use the park to graze their livestock. We need to find solutions to their problems also.
UA has developed a strategic action plan for large carnivore conservation in Uganda, and lions is one of the carnivores that are being covered in this plan. Now, this plan basically covers a diagnosis of what are the issues?
In order to reverse the decline in lion numbers, the Uganda Wildlife Authority has developed a conservation action plan for the 5 large carnivores in Uganda. Uganda Wildlife Authority and Wildlife Conservation Society are looking for funding to support this plan, and in particular funding to both help the pastoralists around the park as well as funding to be able to compensate people if they lose livestock. The numbers of livestock killed each year are not that high, and providing some help will build better relations between these people and the park authorities. A critical need first, though, is to improve the rangeland where the pastoralists graze their livestock and also provide water sources for them. There is also a need to fence some of the fishing villages in the park to provide protection to people at night. Lions are a symbol of strength, integrity, and power. As such, they're often used in advertising and as logos to give a certain image to the business. Several companies in Uganda use lions to advertise their products, but how many of them put anything back into supporting the animal that helps them generate income? Similarly, many tourism businesses are profiting from the ability to show their clients lions, and yet could lose out if lion numbers continue to decline. Funding is required to help improve the lands of the pastoralists around the parks and thereby reduce the conflict with the Lions and Uganda Wildlife Authority. Could these companies work together to help bring this about? If nothing happens soon, the research Edward and Mustafa are showing indicates that most lions will have disappeared from Uganda in the next 10 to 20 years. Is this something Uganda can afford? Tourists come to Uganda because they can combine mountain gorillas with the big game animals. If they can't see lions, then they're more likely to visit Kenya or Tanzania and then fly to Rwanda, where they can be with gorillas in a 2-hour drive and trek. Edward is in the process of carrying out research on what value lions are to Uganda's economy. A back-of-the-envelope calculation, though, indicates that each lion may bring in $140,000 each year to the country. Uganda's lions number only 400 animals, according to Edward's research. Of this number, only about 140 are likely to be adult animals. Only about 25 to 30 will be adult males living in a pride. Uganda's king of the beasts is really down to the last few. Will they be the last kings of Uganda, or will people rally together to turn the numbers around again?